My name is Clara Bennett, and today I want to share with you a story about finding my true family after losing the one I was born into. It is a tale of survival, determination, and ultimately discovering that blood does not always make a family, but love and respect certainly do. On my 18th birthday, my parents finally decided to treat our family to a restaurant dinner. They even announced that my sister Elsa, my brother Leo and I could each order one dish of our choice. It seemed like such a generous gesture at the time, though I should have known better. Elsa, ever the queen of our household, immediately ordered the most expensive item on the menu, a lavish seafood platter that gleamed under the restaurant lights like a crown jewel. Leo, with his typical enthusiasm, chose his beloved Hawaiian pizza, practically bouncing in his seat as he announced his selection. When it came to my turn, I surveyed the options carefully, knowing full well that both seafood and pineapple would trigger my severe allergies. After much consideration, I quietly requested a simple steak, hoping it would not cause too much of a stir. However, when my mother Iris glanced at the total on our bill, her face darkened like storm clouds gathering before a tempest. Without hesitation, she drew a firm line through my order with her pen, as if erasing me from existence itself. "Clara," she said with that tone I knew so well, the one that brooked no argument, "your sister and brother have already ordered plenty of food. Besides, your father and I do not particularly care for steak." I bowed my head and swallowed the familiar taste of disappointment that had become my constant companion. What they failed to remember, or perhaps simply chose to ignore, was that this was supposed to be my birthday celebration. Yet there I sat, staring at a table that would soon be filled with dishes I could not eat, realizing with crystalline clarity that I had always been nothing more than an expendable option in my parents' eyes. I remained frozen in my chair like a statue, watching as my parents and sister engaged in animated conversation about college life across from me, while Leo sat beside them, absorbed in his mobile game, occasionally interjecting with jokes that sent ripples of laughter through their tight circle. I felt like a ghost haunting their celebration, invisible and unwelcome, separated from their warmth by an invisible but impenetrable wall. When the food arrived, Leo could barely contain his excitement. "Mom, Dad, you have got to try this Hawaiian pizza. It is the signature dish here at Olive Garden, absolutely delicious." He grabbed a slice and took an enormous bite, cheese stretching comically from his mouth to the plate. Elsa rolled her eyes with theatrical disdain, delicately picking up a piece of salmon with her fork. Honestly, who comes to a proper restaurant to eat pizza? Seafood is where the real quality lies. I simply do not understand your taste sometimes, Leo. "Mom, Dad, try mine," Leo insisted, waving his pizza slice in the air like a banner. As the familiar bickering began between my siblings, my mother quickly intervened with practiced ease, serving each of them portions from their respective dishes. Now, she said, with the warm smile she reserved for them, "your father and I are not particularly hungry for these foods, but we are simply happy that our family can finally gather together like this for once." My father Hugo raised his wine glass, his eyes glistening with what appeared to be tears of joy. "Let them enjoy themselves, Iris. In the blink of an eye, our children have grown up so much. Soon they will scatter across the country, and moments like these will become precious memories." Seeing the emotional turn in the conversation, Elsa immediately raised her soda glass and wrapped her arm around my mother's shoulder with practiced charm. "Are you two trying to make me cry? If you are going to be sentimental, then I demand lobster to make up for the emotional damage." "Me too, I want some as well," Leo chimed in, his mouth still stuffed full of pizza, raising his hand with such enthusiasm that my parents burst into delighted laughter. They immediately signaled the waiter to add more items to our order. I sat there staring blankly at a banner hanging on the wall that read, "Good luck on your sats." The irony was not lost on me. My heart felt heavy as tears began to fall silently into my untouched rice, each drop carrying years of accumulated pain and loneliness. Throughout my entire childhood, I had never truly been seen or acknowledged by my parents. For the first 13 years of my life, I had been essentially abandoned in rural Alabama, living with my grandmother Martha like an unwanted burden that everyone preferred to forget. When my parents finally brought me to their home in Connecticut, I had harbored such hope that I might finally receive even a fraction of their attention and love. Now that dream had become reality, but the satisfaction I had imagined was nowhere to be found. Leo kept staring at the untouched food in front of me, calling my name several times before I snapped back to reality and slid my plate toward him. "Clara, I know the satiety pressure is getting to you, but you cannot just stop eating. Come on, eat something before it all disappears." Upon hearing this, Elsa glanced at me with a calculating look and deliberately rotated the seafood platter until it sat directly in front of me. She smiled with false sweetness as she spoke. "Even if you cannot have your steak, you should not throw a tantrum and refuse to eat altogether. At least try some of this." When I failed to respond, her smile grew even more pronounced, and she continued with feigned concern. "Mother, perhaps we should cancel the lobster and order steak instead." Before she could finish her sentence, both of my parents immediately frowned and cut her off with sharp voices. "Absolutely not. The kitchen has already started preparing the food. How can we possibly change the order now? If she wants to starve herself, then let her. What kind of ridiculous behavior is this?" I managed to force out a bitter smile and whispered softly, "But I am allergic to seafood." I had expected that hearing this would elicit at least some small amount of guilt or concern from my parents. Instead, they both frowned and let out dismissive scoffs. "Oh, really? This is the first I am hearing about it," my father said, his voice dripping with skepticism and accusation. "I think you are just making up lies because you want me to spend more money. Do you think my money grows on trees for you to waste?" My mother was even more direct in her cruelty. She used her fork to rap sharply against my hand, the metal stinging against my knuckles. "Look at yourself, acting so pathetically dramatic. Have I ever failed to provide you with food or clothing, and now you have the audacity to give me attitude over one simple dish? Can you not show even a shred of maturity and understanding?" The tears came again, flowing beyond my control like a dam that had finally burst after years of pressure. Maturity. Had I not been mature enough already? In this household, I was less of a daughter and more of an unpaid servant. What other family expected their daughter to wake up at 5 in the morning to prepare breakfast for everyone? What other daughter lived in a storage room in the basement while her siblings enjoyed spacious bedrooms upstairs? What other daughter was responsible for all the household chores, cooking, cleaning, and laundry while still being expected to maintain excellent grades in school? I had been forced to steal moments for studying between my endless domestic responsibilities. Seeing me cry silently without defending myself, the entire table fell into an uncomfortable silence. My father's expression gradually darkened like the sky before a violent storm. I recognized this familiar atmosphere of mounting tension and felt the overwhelming urge to flee, to put as much distance as possible between myself and this suffocating family drama. However, when my eyes fell once again on that "Good luck on your SATs" banner, I forced myself to stay seated. 13 years of longing and hope for my parents' love had created chains that I found impossible to break, even as they tightened around my throat. At least being here meant that no one would point at me and call me a burden anymore. At least here, no one would refer to me as a parentless little mongrel. I swallowed my hurt and humiliation, staring at the faded letters on that banner, and whispered with the smallest voice possible, "I truly am allergic. Could we perhaps add just a simple Caesar salad? They are not very expensive." "Absolutely not!" This time, all four of them responded in unison, their voices creating a chorus of rejection that felt like a physical blow. At that exact moment, the banner on the wall suddenly snapped in half with a loud crack, the old, deteriorated letters scattering to the floor like falling leaves. In that instant, it felt as though the last thread connecting me to any hope for familial love had been severed completely. Without another thought, I stood up and overturned the entire table with both hands. Food, drinks, and dishes went flying everywhere, splashing across their clothes and creating chaos in the previously serene restaurant. As they screamed and scrambled to avoid the mess, I looked directly at them with eyes that burned red with years of suppressed rage and declared in a voice loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear, "If this is how things are going to be, then I see no reason to remain part of this family any longer." With that declaration hanging in the air like a bomb that had just exploded, I grabbed my backpack and ran toward the exit, leaving behind the wreckage of what had never truly been a family dinner. I had barely made it to the parking lot outside when someone grabbed my backpack and yanked it so hard that it flew from my shoulders and hit the asphalt with a loud thud. "Stop right there!" My father's voice boomed behind me. "When you make a mistake, you do not get to throw a tantrum like a spoiled child. Where are your manners? Where is your respect?" I turned to face him, my chest heaving with emotion and adrenaline. "I am a parentless mongrel, as you have made abundantly clear. Of course I have no manners," I shouted back, meeting his gaze with defiance that surprised even myself. His response was swift and brutal, his hand connected with my cheek in a slap that sent shockwaves through my skull and left my ears ringing. "Over one simple plate of food, you dare to defy me like this? I can see that your mother has been far too lenient with you. That is why you have become so wild and uncontrollable." Too lenient. The absurdity of his accusation hit me like a second slap. I let out a cold, bitter laugh and spat out one word as I bent to retrieve my backpack. Pathetic. For too many years, I had been naive enough to believe that if I just tried harder, worked longer hours, achieved higher grades, and demanded less attention, my parents might eventually notice me and love me the way they loved Elsa and Leo. Even when faced with countless disappointments and rejections, I had never dared to express even the smallest complaint or show the slightest resentment toward them. But now I finally understood the truth that had been staring me in the face all along. No matter how much pain I endured or how many sacrifices I made, they would never truly see me as their daughter. I had been hurting myself for nothing. It was time to stop. My mother Iris had been standing to one side, watching as other restaurant patrons began to poke their heads out to witness our family drama. Feeling embarrassed by the public nature of our conflict, she quickly approached me with false concern dripping from her voice. "You are clearly going through a rebellious phase, and we simply cannot control you anymore. But honestly, is one plate of food really worth causing such a scene?" The more she spoke, the angrier she became. She grabbed my arm with fingers that dug into my flesh like claws and began dragging me back toward the restaurant entrance. "You are coming back inside with me right now, and you can order whatever you want, but if you do not finish every single bite, you will face serious consequences when we get home." As she spoke, her eyes began to fill with crocodile tears, transforming her into the picture of a long-suffering mother dealing with an impossible child. My siblings, seeing me pull away from her grasp, immediately rushed to her aid, supporting her while directing looks of pure hatred toward me. "Clara, have you not caused enough trouble for one evening? Are you not embarrassed enough by your behavior?" Elsa hissed at me with venom in her voice. This is exactly what I would expect from someone who grew up in the countryside. You simply do not know how to behave properly in civilized society. You have completely ruined what should have been a lovely family gathering. Leo looked at me with undisguised disgust and said what I knew they had all been thinking for years. I honestly do not understand why Mom and Dad bothered bringing you back from Alabama at all. It would have been so much better for everyone if they had just left you there to fend for yourself." Those words hit me like a physical blow, and I could not stop the tears that began flowing down my cheeks. The nightmare of my childhood in rural Alabama came rushing back with vivid, painful clarity. When I was 5 years old, a group of local children had deliberately pushed me into a pond, and I had nearly drowned. Instead of comforting me or seeking justice, my grandmother Martha had taken out her leather belt and forced me to apologize to those same children for causing trouble. From that day forward, I became the target that everyone in the village felt free to abuse and torment. Even the stray dogs that wandered the streets were treated with more kindness and respect than I ever received. When I turned 10, my brother Leo had fallen ill with a high fever. Instead of taking him to a doctor or hospital for proper medical care, my grandmother had fallen under the influence of some television evangelist. She became convinced that if she arranged an engagement between me and a man in his 60s, this somehow would ensure Leo's recovery and bring blessings to our family. The truth was that Leo was suffering from nothing more serious than a common flu that could have been easily treated with a few days of rest and proper medication at any local clinic. However, when I turned 13, that same elderly man cornered me on my walk home from school and attempted to drag me into a cornfield. I fought back with every ounce of strength I possessed, eventually hitting him in the head with a rock before managing to escape. The incident even made the local news broadcasts. It was only after this scandal erupted that my parents finally decided to bring me back to live with them in Connecticut. At the time, I had been so grateful and hopeful, thinking that they had finally decided to rescue me and welcome me into their family. I had no idea that in their eyes, I had always been nothing more than a liability and a source of embarrassment. Just like my name suggested, Clara Bennett, the unwanted one, the extra person who did not belong. I could not contain my emotions any longer. Through my tears, I cried out for everyone to hear. "Fine then. I will disappear from your lives right now. I will never bother any of you again." I clutched my backpack tightly against my chest and ran as fast as my legs could carry me, tears streaming behind me like a river of pain that had been dammed up for far too long. I did not stop running until I reached the downtown park, where I finally collapsed on a bench in a secluded corner. Night had fallen completely around me, and I realized that aside from my backpack and cell phone, I had absolutely nothing. I watched a happy family of 3 playing together in the distance, their laughter and joy serving as a stark contrast to my own misery, and I let myself cry with complete abandon for the first time in years. "Clara? What are you doing here, sweetheart?" The familiar voice caused me to look up immediately through my tears. It was my homeroom teacher, Ms. Grace Campbell, holding the hand of a little girl who could not have been more than 7 years old. Both of them were looking at me with genuine concern and worry etched across their faces. "Oh, honey, it is much too late and dangerous for you to be here alone. Why don't you come home with us for tonight? Whatever is troubling you, we can talk about it together, okay?" Ms. Campbell's voice was warm and soothing, like a gentle balm on my wounded soul. She nudged the little girl forward, who immediately took my hand in both of hers, and declared with all the confidence that only children possess, "Big sister, please come home with us." Looking at my silent phone and completely empty wallet, I swallowed my pride and gratefully accepted their kind invitation. Miss Campbell even took the initiative to send a text message to my parents, explaining that she thought my grades were excellent and that she wanted me to stay with her family for the month leading up to the SAT exam to help me with intensive preparation and tutoring. My mother's response was a series of angry messages calling me ungrateful and immature for bothering my teacher with my problems. She complained that my grades were poor anyway, that I was worthless and would never amount to anything, and that if I failed to perform well on the exam, I should not bother coming home at all. Notably absent from her messages was any request for me to return home, or any offer to compensate Ms. Campbell for the trouble and expense of housing me. For the next month, I was able to completely set aside all the exhausting household chores and emotional burdens that had weighed me down for years. Instead, I focused entirely on studying for the SAT and working on my college applications under Ms. Campbell's patient guidance and encouragement. Seeing the hope and expectation in her eyes, I silently promised myself that I would repay her kindness by achieving the best results possible. I was determined to succeed not only for my own future, but also to justify the faith she had placed in me. The month passed quickly, and the SAT exam date arrived. Throughout this entire period, my parents never once reached out to me voluntarily. They even stopped transferring the measly $100 per month that had served as my allowance, treating me as though I had simply ceased to exist. However, their Facebook profiles were updated constantly, sometimes 8 or 9 times per day, as though they were deliberately trying to showcase their happy family life without me. Elsa posted endless photos of new clothes and accessories. Even though it is still summer, Mum has already bought my entire winter wardrobe. Every text gets an immediate response. I love you so much, Mum. Leo shared pictures of expensive electronics with captions like, Dad says grades do not matter. No matter what score I get, I am getting the latest iPhone and the whole Apple ecosystem. Dad, you are the best. Whenever these posts appeared, my parents were always the first to like and comment, engaging in warm, affectionate exchanges that felt like daggers to my heart. After I left, my mother had converted the basement storage room where I had been living into a proper space and adopted the small dog that Elsa had been begging for. She posted a video on Facebook showing off their new pet with the caption, "Finally got rid of the eyesore. Having a little dog to guard the house is perfect protection against thieves. I am so happy. I finally have the perfect life I always wanted, a son, a daughter, and a beloved pet." It became clear that without me, their lives had actually become more joyful and carefree. I finally understood that this family functioned just as well, if not better, without me. I was the unwanted element, the one who should disappear. By now, I no longer cried over these realizations. After a brief pang of sadness, my heart would return to its normal rhythm because something far more important had happened. Harvard University's admissions office had contacted our school about me. Ms. Campbell hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe, tears of joy streaming down her face. My dear, wonderful girl, a perfect SAT score. You have given me the most incredible surprise. Ms. Campbell, this is all because of your excellent teaching and support, I replied, though something strange was happening to me. When I first learned about my test results, I had felt nothing but happiness and relief. But now, wrapped in my teacher's warm embrace, I found myself unexpectedly emotional, my eyes filling with tears I had not expected to shed. Big Sister is amazing. I want to treat Big Sister to a celebration dinner, the little girl announced, throwing herself into my arms and waving a red envelope filled with money she had saved from her allowance. She had become the source of joy and laughter in this household, and her presence made every day brighter and more hopeful. Ms. Campbell watched us playfully arguing with a smile of pure contentment. When I tried to refuse the gift, she gently patted my head with the tenderness of a true mother. Sweetheart, this is her way of showing how much she cares about you. You cannot refuse such a heartfelt gesture. Or are you saying that when you told us we were like family to you, you did not really mean it? Seeing the little girl purse her lips and pretend to pout in preparation for a dramatic display of hurt feelings, I could not bear to disappoint her, even in play. I nodded my agreement, which caused her to break into delighted giggles. Ms. Campbell clapped her hands together as though she had just remembered something wonderful. "Oh, the school is planning to organize a major graduation celebration for you. They want to invite the media to cover your achievement and use the publicity to enhance the school's reputation." I nodded enthusiastically, my heart filling with anticipation and excitement. "That sounds wonderful. I have never had a celebration like that before." "Thank you so much for making this possible, Miss Campbell." The three of them surrounded me in a group embrace, their eyes filled with protective love and concern for my well-being. The suppressed emotions that I had been carrying for years suddenly erupted like a volcano, and I found myself sobbing into Ms. Campbell's shoulder while she held me close. Those people who shared my blood had hurt me, degraded me, and made me feel worthless and unwanted. But this teacher and her family had chosen to love me, care for me, and treat me as though I was precious beyond measure. I finally understood that blood relation is not the determining factor in true family relationships. The people who were not worthy of my love and loyalty should have been released from my heart long ago. On the day of my graduation celebration, I wore a beautiful new dress that Ms. Campbell had specially purchased for the occasion. I felt radiant and confident as I stood at the podium delivering my speech to the assembled crowd. During a brief break from the intense media interviews, I stepped outside for some fresh air and inadvertently noticed that the door to a large private dining room was standing wide open. Inside, I could see 4 familiar figures standing proudly at the center of attention. In the middle of the room, my father Hugo, my mother Iris, my sister Elsa, and my brother Leo stood close together, basking in the congratulations and compliments of their guests, their faces glowing with pride and satisfaction. My father had his arm around Elsa's shoulders as he spoke to the assembled crowd with evident pleasure. "My daughter has always been such a joy to us, so well behaved and respectful. She graduated and immediately told us she wanted to come back home to build her career here because she simply cannot bear to be separated from her family. I hope all of you will continue to support and guide her in the years to come." My mother was embracing Leo affectionately while holding up a trophy for everyone to see. My Leo makes me just as proud. Although he did not get into the most prestigious high school, he is incredibly talented in so many other ways. Just recently, he won the state championship in street dancing, and he is about to compete in a national competition in New York City. The guests applauded enthusiastically and showered my parents with praise, telling them how well they had raised their children. They predicted that both Elsa and Leo would bring great honor to the Bennett family name in the future, and that my parents would enjoy many years of prosperity and happiness as a result of their children's success. The room was filled with laughter, celebration, and joy as glasses clinked together in toast after toast. Everyone inside appeared perfectly content and festive, which made me, standing alone at the doorway, seem pathetically out of place and unwelcome in comparison. I frowned and was about to turn away when Elsa suddenly appeared and grabbed my arm, pulling me forcefully into the room. "Clara, what are you doing here?" She was wearing a small tiara that caught the light and sent sparkles dancing across the walls. Behind her, my parents and brother stood together in a defensive formation, looking at me not with joy, relief, or familial warmth, but with disgust, annoyance, and barely concealed hatred. After a month of separation, their first reaction to seeing me was not the embrace of loving family members, but the wariness of people confronted by an unwelcome intruder. "I know exactly why she is here," Leo declared with malicious satisfaction. "She found out that Mum and Dad are introducing Elsa to important people who can help her career today, so she came here specifically to ruin everything for us. She has always been jealous of Elsa and wanted to compete with her for everything. There is no way she would miss an opportunity like this to cause trouble." Upon hearing his words, my parents' expressions immediately darkened with anger and resentment. My mother stared at me with eyes that could have cut glass. Look at her test scores. As if she has any right to show her face at an event like this. How shameless. Get out of here immediately, my father roared as he approached me with clear intent to physically remove me from the premises. He grabbed my arm with enough force to leave bruises and began dragging me toward the exit. Get out! Get out! Get out! You disgusting little animal! Do not think for 1 second that you can take advantage of me or get a single penny from me. I do not have an ungrateful daughter like you. As I struggled desperately against his grip, I could see the other guests in the room pointing and whispering among themselves. Their looks of contempt, disdain, and judgment felt like physical blows that threatened to overwhelm me completely. My body was shaking uncontrollably, and I tried to break free from my father's grasp. But his strength was far greater than mine. All I could do was close my eyes tightly and try to disappear mentally from this humiliating situation. I tried to comfort myself with silent mantras. If I cannot see them, they cannot hurt me. This will be over soon. My life has nothing to do with these people anymore. I am leaving this place and these people behind forever. Just as my father was about to throw me out the door like a piece of garbage, potentially causing me to fall and injure myself on the hard floor, a strong pair of arms caught me and held me safely. An angry voice shouted at my father with protective fury, "What do you think you are doing?" I opened my eyes in amazement to see Ms. Campbell standing there like a lioness defending her cub. This gentle woman who usually spoke in soft, measured tones was now facing my father with blazing eyes and righteous anger. "How has Clara offended you? She is your own flesh and blood. How can you treat your daughter this way?" My father was momentarily stunned by this unexpected confrontation, but his shock quickly turned to indignant rage at being challenged in public. He pointed an accusing finger at me while shouting, "I am disciplining my own daughter. This is none of your business. She deserves whatever punishment she gets. Her SAT scores were absolutely terrible, and now she has come here to cause trouble for her sister. She is a complete embarrassment." My mother rushed forward to add her voice to the attack. "Exactly. She has always been jealous of her sister and cannot stand to see Elsa succeed. She has been this way since she was small, with a truly evil heart. Do not let her fool you, teacher." Elsa and Leo stood behind my parents with expressions of smug satisfaction and cruel amusement, clearly enjoying watching me being humiliated and attacked. The guests, seeing an opportunity for entertainment, gathered closer to observe our family drama unfold, making no attempt to hide their fascination with the spectacle before them. Faced with their whispered comments and judgmental stares, the pain and frustration that I had been accumulating for more than a decade finally erupted like a volcano that had been building pressure for years. I pulled myself upright in Ms. Campbell's protective embrace, my eyes red with tears and years of suppressed rage, and spoke in a voice that carried throughout the room and beyond. "Ungrateful." I repeated the accusation they had been using to define me, my mouth twisting into a bitter smile of self-mockery. "Tell me, when exactly have you ever given me the opportunity to be ungrateful?" "Clara Bennett, Clara Bennett, do you know what my name means? The unwanted one. From the day you abandoned me in rural Alabama for more than a decade without a single word or visit, from the moment you were ready to marry me off to a 60-year-old man just because Leo had a fever, from the instant you brought me back to Connecticut only to use me as unpaid domestic help. When have I ever been anything other than unwanted and expendable in this family? When have I ever had the privilege of being able to show ingratitude? My parents clearly had not expected me to confront them so publicly and directly. Their faces turned ashen white with shock and embarrassment. My mother immediately rushed toward me, attempting to cover my mouth with her hands while forcing a nervous laugh. "You are talking nonsense. Children should not hold grudges about such silly things." "Grudges? I dodged away from her reaching hands, tears flowing down my cheeks like a river, but my posture remained straight and defiant. These are not grudges I am carrying. This is pain. This is the terror of being dragged into a cornfield by my so-called fiancé when I was 13 years old, fighting for my life to escape a fate worse than death. And afterward, my so-called parents, instead of asking if I was hurt or traumatized, did nothing but complain about the trouble I had caused them. Have either of you ever asked me how I felt? Have you ever shown the slightest concern for my well-being? My father was shaking with rage at being exposed in front of so many witnesses. He raised his hand to strike me again. "You little monster! I will beat you to death for telling such lies. Go ahead and hit me." I lifted my chin defiantly, meeting his eyes without flinching, and spoke loud enough for everyone in the room to hear clearly. "Do it right here in front of all these people. Let them see exactly how you treat your daughter who scored a perfect SAT." The words "perfect SAT" seemed to have magical power. My father's hand froze in mid-air as though he had been turned to stone. The room erupted in gasps and whispers of amazement. At that exact moment, the school principal came rushing into the room with a crowd of reporters following closely behind him. The principal immediately positioned himself between me and my parents, his face stern with disapproval as he addressed them directly. "Mr. Bennett, Mrs. Bennett, this is a public space, and I must ask you to behave appropriately. Children are not toys for parents to abuse when they feel frustrated or angry." My mother grasped at this intervention like a drowning person reaching for a life preserver. She immediately began speaking to the principal and the gathered guests with desperate enthusiasm. "Please do not listen to her lies. She performs terribly in school, and her SAT scores must have been awful. She is standing here making up stories to get sympathy and attention. That is right. The principal is here now, and he can expose her lies for what they are. She has been a difficult, disobedient child since birth, and we simply cannot control her behavior anymore." "Mrs. Bennett!" The principal's voice cut through her rambling with authority and clarity, ensuring that every person in the room could hear his words distinctly. "Clara Bennett is not lying. She is this year's perfect SAT scorer for the entire state of Connecticut. She is a National Merit Scholar. Harvard, Stanford, and MIT have all contacted our school about her. We are here today specifically to celebrate her graduation and academic achievements." The room exploded with exclamations of shock and disbelief. What? A perfect SAT score? National Merit Scholar? My goodness! The reporters immediately turned their attention and cameras toward my stunned parents and siblings, capturing their expressions of complete bewilderment and growing horror. The transformation on my parents' faces was truly spectacular to behold. Their expressions shifted from anger to shock to dawning comprehension to desperate regret, like watching a time-lapse video of a building collapsing in slow motion. My mother opened and closed her mouth repeatedly, like a fish gasping for air, unable to produce any sound. My father slowly lowered his raised hand, staring at me with a complex mixture of emotions that he seemed unable to process. Elsa and Leo were completely speechless, and Elsa's little tiara now looked ridiculous and pathetic rather than regal. My mother was the first to recover her ability to speak. She forced her face into a smile that was more grotesque than any expression of grief, and tried to reach for my hands with trembling fingers. "Clara, my dear Clara, my precious daughter." Mother had no idea. "You see, sweetheart, why did you not tell us at home about such wonderful news? This is all just a terrible misunderstanding. Come quickly, come home with Mom and Dad right away. I will cook you a beautiful steak dinner, a huge portion, just the way you like it." My father cleared his throat and softened his voice in a pathetic attempt at paternal warmth. "Yes, Clara, this whole situation is Dad's fault. I owe you a sincere apology. You know that family members never hold grudges against each other overnight. You must be exhausted from all that studying and test preparation. Let Dad take a good look at you and see if you have lost weight. Watching their complete reversal of attitude and behavior, I felt nothing but disgusting irony. Their current attempts to win me back had nothing to do with parental love or genuine regret. They were only interested in me now because of the prestige and potential benefits that my National Merit Scholar status could bring to them. I took a deliberate step backward, putting distance between myself and my mother's reaching hands. I looked at each of them in turn, my father, my mother, my sister, my brother, and then at all the guests and reporters who were watching this drama unfold. In a voice that carried clearly throughout the room, I made my declaration. Go home? Which home would that be? The home where I lived in a basement storage room and worked as a household servant. The home where I was not even allowed to order a single dish I could safely eat on my own birthday. Thank you, but no thank you. I took a deep breath, gathering all of my strength and courage for what I needed to say next. My voice rang out strong and clear. Today I am asking everyone present, as well as all the reporters and viewers watching this broadcast, to serve as witnesses to my declaration. I, Clara Bennett, am hereby formally and permanently severing all relationship with my biological parents, Hugo Bennett and Iris Bennett. From this moment forward, we are strangers. Their lives and deaths, their fortunes and misfortunes, are no longer any concern of mine whatsoever. The corridor fell into absolute silence following my declaration, and then erupted into an even louder buzz of conversation and commentary. My parents' faces turned deathly pale with shock and horror. My father's rage exploded as he shouted, "How dare you? I am still your father. My blood flows through your veins." I no longer had any interest in listening to their protests or threats. I turned around and took Ms. Campbell's hand firmly in mine. She had been standing behind me throughout this entire confrontation, giving me the strength and courage I needed to finally stand up for myself. "Ms. Campbell, let us go," I said quietly, with a sense of peace and liberation I had never experienced before. Together, we walked through the crowd toward the other end of the corridor, where my real graduation celebration was taking place, filled with people who actually cared about me and wanted to see me succeed. I did not look back even once at the chaos and devastation I was leaving behind, or at the people who had called themselves my family for so many painful years. My public disownment of my biological family quickly spread across social media and became a major news story that captured the attention of the entire nation. The hashtag National Merit Scholar Cuts Ties with Family became a trending topic that sparked intense debate and discussion. After the initial shock and outrage wore off, my parents found themselves at the center of a massive storm of public criticism and condemnation. Even when they published official statements attempting to explain their side of the story and issue public apologies, internet users had already discovered and analyzed their old Facebook posts, which revealed the full extent of their hypocrisy and favoritism. The old news stories about my grandmother Martha's attempt to arrange a marriage for me as a child, as well as the incident with the elderly man who had attempted to assault me, were also dug up and shared widely across social platforms. As a result of this exposure, my grandmother was investigated for her role in arranging illegal child marriage and endangering a minor. She was eventually convicted and sentenced to prison. My parents' employers were affected by the negative publicity, my sister's job prospects were ruined, and my brother found himself ostracized at school, with classmates and teachers pointing and whispering about him wherever he went. They attempted to contact me through phone calls, text messages and emails, all filled with curses, blame, and demands. They called me unfilial and ungrateful, accused me of destroying their family, and insisted that I issue a public statement clearing my grandmother's name and providing a written statement of forgiveness that could be used in her legal proceedings. I blocked all of their contact information and refused to engage with them in any way. However, they refused to give up. When they could no longer reach me electronically, they actually showed up at Ms. Campbell's house in person, demanding that I comply with their wishes. "Clara, you ungrateful little brat, come out here right now. I know you are hiding in there." My father's voice carried a tone of barely controlled violence that made my blood run cold. This was immediately followed by my mother's shrill wailing and theatrical sobbing. "Clara, my baby, please open the door. Your mother is begging you. You cannot be so heartless. You cannot just let your own grandmother go to prison. That is your flesh and blood grandmother who raised you." I immediately called 911 to report the harassment, but the shouting and banging outside continued to grow louder and more threatening. Suddenly, my phone began vibrating frantically with calls from an unknown number. After declining several calls in a row, I finally answered with trembling hands. "Clara!" My father's voice exploded through the phone speaker. "Stop hiding like a coward. If you do not come down here right now and sign that forgiveness letter to get your grandmother out of legal trouble, I am going to break down this door. I will make sure that both you and your interfering teacher regret the day you were born. What you are doing is illegal. I have already called the police." I tried to keep my voice steady despite my fear. "Police? I am disciplining my own daughter. That is my right as a parent." His voice had become completely unhinged. "You better get down here immediately, or when I get my hands on you, you will wish you had never been born." At that moment, the sound of police sirens began to wail in the distance, growing closer and louder with each passing second. Realizing that they were about to face serious legal consequences, my mother immediately began putting on another performance, crying and pleading as though her heart was breaking. "Please, I am begging you to have mercy on your poor mother. I will get down on my knees if necessary." She made a show of preparing to kneel on the ground, but Elsa quickly grabbed her and prevented the dramatic gesture. "Clara, have you no conscience left at all? Can you really stand by and watch your own grandmother go to prison? She raised you for years." Elsa's voice was filled with self-righteous indignation. Seeing that I was still not responding to their emotional manipulation, they realized that the police were almost at the house. They had no choice but to leave quickly, though not without hurling final threats and curses in my direction. The entire incident was captured by security cameras and soon appeared online, generating another wave of public outrage against their behavior. With this additional evidence of harassment and intimidation, they finally understood that the legal and social consequences of continuing to pursue me would be severe. They reluctantly disappeared from my life, though I knew it was only temporary. I carried the blessings and support of Ms. Campbell's family, as well as countless others who had been following my story, as I began my journey to Boston to attend Harvard University. I threw myself into my studies with passionate dedication, while also working part-time jobs to achieve complete financial and emotional independence from anyone who might try to control or manipulate me. However, my biological parents had not truly given up their efforts to maintain some form of control over my life. Throughout my college years, they continued to harass me in various ways, despite my repeated attempts to block their communications and avoid all contact. I had to change my phone number multiple times, and I deleted and blocked them on every social media platform, but they always seemed to find new ways to reach me. They even had the audacity to travel to my university campus to confront me. They would wait outside my dormitory in front of academic buildings and at the campus entrances, carrying signs that read things like, "Outstanding student refuses to acknowledge parents, where is justice?" and "Ungrateful scholar abandons family." Fortunately, the university administration had been fully informed about my situation from the beginning. Campus security maintained strict vigilance and consistently removed my parents from university property before they could approach me or disrupt my education. During my 4 years of undergraduate study, I graduated with highest honors and joined forces with like-minded classmates to launch our own technology startup company. Within a few years, our business had grown substantially and become quite successful. I had achieved complete financial freedom and independence. The first thing I did with my success was to take Ms. Campbell and her family, my true family, on a luxury vacation to celebrate everything we had accomplished together. The little girl who had welcomed me into their home all those years ago had grown into a confident young woman and was now attending an excellent university herself. She still delighted in telling everyone she met about her accomplished big sister, which never failed to make me smile with affectionate embarrassment. Just when I thought my life had finally settled into a peaceful and productive routine, my persistent biological family managed to intrude once again. Somehow, they had discovered that my company was thriving financially, and they decided to contact me using yet another new phone number. During this phone conversation, they began by complaining that I had been heartlessly ignoring my family for all these years and that my coldness was unnatural and cruel. Then they proceeded to tell me about their current difficulties. Elsa had been unemployed since graduating from college because she had unrealistic expectations about salary and working conditions. Leo had become a reclusive shut-in who refused to look for work or contribute anything to the household, and they were rapidly running out of money to support their lifestyles. Since I had become a successful entrepreneur, they declared, it was my responsibility to provide them with well-paying, low-stress jobs that did not require them to move away from their comfortable home. Finally, they demanded that I begin sending them monthly payments for their living expenses, arguing that since I was now wealthy and successful, supporting my parents was both a legal and moral obligation. Listening to their familiar and disgusting sense of entitlement, I felt nothing but cold indifference. Not even the smallest ripple of emotion disturbed my inner peace. I spoke 2 words into the phone, "Keep dreaming." Then I hung up and immediately changed my number once again. When their phone calls and messages could no longer reach me, all 4 of them appeared at my company headquarters with bullhorns and proceeded to cause a massive public disturbance. When my receptionist and security personnel tried to reason with them and ask them to leave, they responded by throwing themselves on the ground and screaming like toddlers having tantrums, which attracted crowds of curious onlookers and created a circus-like atmosphere in front of my building. My father stood at the center of the group with a cheap, crackling megaphone, shouting at the top of his lungs to anyone who would listen. "Come and see what kind of person runs Bennett Technologies. Clara Bennett is a complete ingrate. She makes millions of dollars, but will not give her own parents a single penny to survive. We sacrificed everything to raise her and put her through school, and now she acts like we do not even exist." My mother had positioned herself on the sidewalk, dramatically slapping her thighs and wailing like a professional mourner at a funeral. Her acting was so over the top that it would have been comical if it had not been so pathetic. "My life is so miserable. I gave birth to such a heartless monster. She lives in a mansion while her poor parents are left to starve in Connecticut. Someone please help us get justice." Elsa stood beside my mother, occasionally dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue and adding her own commentary to the performance. "My sister. She has changed so much since she went to college. All she cares about now is money. She will not even help my brother find a job. We do not know what happened to the sweet girl we used to know." Leo stood off to the side looking bored and annoyed, occasionally shouting things like, "Yeah, money does not make you better than everyone else," to show his support for the family cause. More and more people stopped to watch their performance, and some who did not know the full story began to side with them and criticize me for my apparent lack of filial devotion. When my staff informed me about what was happening outside, I walked to the window and looked down at those 4 pathetic figures making fools of themselves in front of my building. I felt nothing but disgust and exhaustion. I turned to my assistant and said simply, Call the police. Contact our legal team immediately. We are taking them to court. This situation needs to be resolved permanently. The video of their public tantrum was posted online and quickly went viral, attracting millions of views and comments. This outstanding scholar support case became a major news story once again because of my high profile and the dramatic history of our family conflict. On the day of the court hearing, the proceedings were broadcast live on the internet to an audience of more than 10 million viewers. In the courtroom, my legal team methodically presented evidence of my childhood experiences and treatment by my parents. They showed the court the original news reports about our public estrangement, screenshots of their cruel and dismissive social media posts, police records of their harassment campaigns, documentation of their attempts to disrupt my education, and video evidence of their recent disturbance at my company. My parents continued to try to present themselves as the victims in this situation, crying about the sacrifices they had made and the ingratitude I had shown them. However, when the judge asked them for specific details about how they had actually supported and cared for me during my childhood, they could only offer vague, contradictory answers that revealed the truth of their neglect and abuse. In the end, the court issued a fair and balanced ruling based on the evidence and the law. The judge determined that I would be required to pay my parents a basic living allowance of $800 per month to ensure that they could meet their fundamental needs. However, the court also issued a restraining order that would allow me to have them arrested if they continued to harass me in any way. When the verdict was announced, the internet exploded with approval and support for the court's decision. $800 per month was enough to provide basic necessities while also establishing clear boundaries that protected me from further abuse. It was a fitting response to their years of coldness and cruelty toward me. The legal judgment also brought renewed media attention to our family's history, and many of the details that had been forgotten over the years were again widely circulated and discussed by news outlets and social media users. Hugo Bennett, Iris Bennett, and their precious children became completely unable to show their faces in public without being recognized and criticized. They could no longer bear the constant scrutiny and judgment they faced in Connecticut, so they eventually moved back to their origins in rural Alabama and disappeared from my world entirely. 1 month after the court's decision became final, I boarded an airplane bound for California. My company was planning to expand into West Coast markets, and this new location would represent the next chapter of my life's journey. For Clara Bennett, this was not an ending, but truly just the beginning of the life I was meant to live. As I settled into my seat and watched the landscape of Connecticut disappear below the clouds, I felt nothing but gratitude for the difficult journey that had brought me to this moment. Every challenge, every heartbreak, every moment of despair had been necessary to transform me from a frightened, abandoned child into a strong, independent woman who knew her own worth. I thought about Ms. Campbell and her family, who had shown me what real love looked like. I thought about all the people who had supported and encouraged me along the way. I thought about the future I was building for myself, filled with purpose, success, and relationships based on mutual respect and genuine affection. The plane climbed higher into the bright blue sky, carrying me toward my new life in California. I closed my eyes and smiled, knowing that Clara Bennett's story was far from over. In fact, the best chapters were still to be written.